And happening now, a disturbing story out of Florida. Investigators are now in the process of exhuming dozens of bodies at the site of a former school for boys, where hundreds of students reportedly were beaten and tortured to death. Phil Keating live in Miami with that story. Phil?
Hi, John. The fourth and final day of very meticulous and tedious grave digging is about to wrap up there at the site of what was once the largest reform school in the country for juvenile delinquents. It's known as the Dozier School for Boys. It's got a horrific and long history, according to more than 350 men who did time there decades ago. Rampant, they say, with abuse, rape, torture, and even murder committed by the staff on the vulnerable boys. This weekend, University of South Florida anthropology researchers successfully unearthed 2 sets of skeletal remains, including a skull, teeth, and bones, at one point carrying them past a grove of white crosses that stands in the area of about 50 unmarked graves. The dig is only happening after urging by Senator Bill Nelson and the state's Attorney General, finally convincing Governor Rick Scott to allow it. A group of survivors called the White House Boys demanded a state investigation 5 years ago that finally ended 3 years ago, unable to prove or disprove the abuse allegations. Relatives of the missing say many of the shallow graves date way back to the 1950s and 60s, and a few came by the Florida Panhandle site over the weekend hoping for answers.
For all these graves of the children and the 2 employees that died at the school that are buried here, they've been quite literally lost in the woods. And so I think that to ultimately be able to provide families with answers, maybe repatriate the remains.
A wrap-up news conference of this first dig. They will resume digging these graves up in October and November. That happens in about 15 minutes. Eventually, these remains, the bones, they'll be taken back to Tampa, where hopefully they can extract some DNA and make some matches, which would give some families some long-sought answers all these years later, possibly even determining how some of these boys died, John.
What an incredible and disturbing story. Phil Keating in Miami. Thanks.
Well, a scare in the air just after takeoff when a plane hit a bird and lost an engine. You've heard these stories before. How does this one end? Passengers tell us about their harrowing experience. Plus, the growing conservative trend to just say no to any sort of foreign conflict or intervention. But could an isolationist policy be all wrong in the case of Syria? We'll go in depth next.
I think it's a mistake to get involved in the Syrian civil war, and I don't see a clear-cut American interest. I don't see either party that is victorious, if either party is victorious, being an American ally.